Realized that like every day when I would wake up, it was essentially like, oh boy, what's going to happen today? And though I had achieved a lot of success, I was concerned that at any moment I could lose it all. And so I wasn't really enjoying life. It was really just a climb for achievements and, a resume. It ended up kicking off a whole introspection to see if I now have another 50 years after my first 40, how do I want to live those differently? And what have been the things that now that I get a chance to do it again, what will I do differently? It doesn't have to be something that you completely change everything about your life. What it can be is just identifying the handful of things that you're really good at and that you could be leaning more into so that the work you're putting into, A, feels like flow, B, you're better at it because you're naturally better at it. And then C, the more you work at it, the better you're getting, as opposed to continuing to put effort into things that are, say, developing, your perceived weaknesses.
You also need someone that is beside you, that knows your limits and, pushes you or tells you, hey, you're going for a burnout. Was there someone in your journey when you decided, okay, I'm going to change my life, this is the way I want to live it, that helped you become that person that you're now?
Being in that mindset of the fears, or I like how he calls them concerns, oftentimes you can't extract yourself, but it's saying like, who would you be if you didn't have those? And if you then are thinking about how your brain operates, you're like, okay, if I just let those things go, wow, how much more free I could be, and maybe even different things than you would do that you're not currently doing.
So I see that you're now helping other high performers build a more sustainable approach to success. What does success mean to you? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the AutoGrade Podcast. Today, my name is Daniel. I'm your host, and today I have Chris, and today is a wonderful day. I think we're going to learn a lot of things. So, Chris, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Chris Woods. I'm a certified professional coach, and I'm an author of a new book called Balls and Brains, a framework for living your best life by overcoming fears and maximizing strengths.
So that's great. That's a good way to start the podcast. And, Chris, you mentioned that at age 40, in the middle of a highly successful corporate career, you flatlined in a hospital bed. Take us back into that moment. What was going through your mind when the world completely stopped, and how did it change your perspective on everything you had built to that point?
So I really just remember afterwards. So I was brought into the hospital. As it turned out, I was bitten by a tick in my back and I got cardiac Lyme disease. I was in the hospital and my heart stopped. So they called the code blue and brought me back, with the paddles, and kept me in the hospital for a few weeks and it eventually installed a pacemaker in my chest. So in the aftermath, when I came to and they told me that I had flatlined for over a minute, I was obviously shocked and, concerned. But really what came out of it over those next few weeks, once they finally said they were going to install a pacemaker and then said that I probably had another 50 years ahead of me. This was now going to be there, with me to safeguard in case anything ever happened to me in the future. It ended up kicking off a whole introspection to see if I now have another 50 years after my first 40, how do I want to live those differently? And what have been the things that now that I get a chance to do it again, what will I do differently?
Yeah, I feel you because in my case, in my journey, it was multiple surgeries. And in the first one, I almost died in that one. I was pretty close to the other side. But I don't remember what actually happened 5 days after the surgery. I only remember one thing. When the nurse told me that she was going to remove the surgical tube from my mouth and that it was going to be painful, and it was, right? But that's the only thing that I remember. So, and I also led me to introspection way later into what I wanted to do with my life and how differently I had to live. And I feel that. So can you please take us into, what that introspection led to you to say, this is not the way I'm going to live my life?
So it really uncovered the biggest thing that I had been living very fear driven. So, which a lot of people do. And I realized that like every day when I would wake up, it was essentially like, oh boy, what's going to happen today. And though I had achieved a lot of success, I was concerned that at any moment I could lose it all. And so I wasn't really enjoying life. It was really just a climb for achievements and, a resume. And I realized that I now had a second chance to do this. I could still be ambitious and still be, disciplined and ultimately successful. But can I do it from more of a place of love and fearlessness as opposed to fearful thinking. So that was the first thing that came up. The other thing that came up was was at Google. I was working at Google at the time, and I had an executive coach, and she had given me this Clifton's Strength Finders diagnostic exam that you can take, that people can take online, and it gives you back your top 5 and your top 10 strengths. And I was looking at my top 5 strengths, and a lot of the things that they were saying is that, I was happiest in entrepreneurial and turnaround situations in corporate life as opposed to working for a big corporation. And that felt really right to me because I had been at Google, coming up on 7 years, and I got there when it was still early stages. But at that stage, later, it was big, and it was really just kind of like you did jobs, and you just were around, pegging around a hole. So that gave me a real jolt to say, you know what, you're right. I should be doing things that more, play to my strengths. And that was what I ultimately did. And that's what I continue to do.
Oh, that's great. So, in your framework, you talk about why high performers feel stuck even when they're winning. What is the psychological trap that keeps ambitious people grinding, and how can someone recognize that they are in before a burnout ever happens?
Yeah. So I think it's a couple of things. The first part of it is oftentimes, high achievers who do ultimately achieve have been running on fear, a lot of it. And then once they get to the point where they are successful, the fear now becomes also a fear of losing it. And even if they're unhappy in the role and they know that it's not really playing to their strengths or feeling like they are doing what they're actually meant to be doing, they're afraid to change because they think that, change is scary and they could fail. And so what I used to feel the same way too, and what I try to, coach people is it doesn't have to be, catastrophic. It doesn't have to be a revolution. It doesn't have to be something that you completely change everything about your life. What it can be is just identifying the handful of things that you're really good at and that you could be leaning more into so that the work you're putting into A, feels like flow. B, you're better at it because you're naturally better at it. And then C, the more you work at it, the better you're getting, as opposed to continuing to put effort into things that are, say, developing, your perceived weaknesses. That maybe the best that you can do is probably get to average on that. But why not be extraordinary if you want to work at things anyway? Identify the things that you're really good at and go from good to great on that. So that's what I've decided to do. And that's where I end up working with a lot of people is once they've achieved some sort of success, they kind of feel trapped because they're like, I can't really change this or go off of course because what if it goes wrong?
Feel that because one of my biggest fears, and I think I'm speaking not only for me, but for many people around the world, is that when I achieve something, the human instinct is to want more. Right?
Sure.
There's always that fear of not being able to accomplish more what you already accomplished. But at the same time, what you're saying is right. If you go from doing something bad to average, it's not the same from doing good to great. Right? So you
Yeah,
have to define what is good for you.
for sure. And then when you're successful too, I think it's then becomes a fear of falling off from the top. And it doesn't have to be that way. So what I always say is that when we do this kind of work together, it doesn't mean that you then need to apply a revolution to your work and personal life. It's more of like a conscious evolution so that you're moving. And the analogy I always say is that if you feel like you're in a rowboat and, right, and you're doing all the work and you're pulling the rows for these things, You feel like as soon as you stop, the boat's going to stop and everything's going to go. Whereas I'd like to get people into a sailboat, right? So you're still on the ocean and you're still navigating, but it's not just through your whole brute effort and strength and the things that you've been doing all the time. It's more like, can you leverage some talents? Can you leverage coaching? Can you leverage additional things that are available to you, even in your faith and just with gratitude, so that you don't feel like you're doing this all on your own? And it is an eye-opening experience for a lot of people because it doesn't have to be as difficult as it currently is.
And one of the important things that we also have to talk about when, leading into those kind of points is that you also need someone that is beside you, that knows your limits and, you know, pushes you or tells you, hey, you're going for a burnout. Was there someone in your journey when you decided, okay, I'm going to change my life? This is the way I want to live it, that helped you become that person that you're now?
Yeah, I'd say it's the executive coach that I had at Google because she opened up my eyes to some blind spots that I had. Again, I had been running all just on brute force that had been successful, but she ended up holding up a mirror to me to some blind spots of things that I could be doing better, as well as then opened up my eyes to that Clifton Strength Finders, the things that I was really good at that I could lean more into and feel a bit more fulfilled. So she had such a profound impact on me that I decided that once I would get to some point in my career, I would also like to become an executive coach. So that's the reason why that I've done it now. So post Google, I went and started a CEO consulting business and then was recruited by 4 different investor backed companies to turn around underperforming companies. So they'd been around for a few years, but they weren't profitable or they were trying to set them up for sale. So I would go in and change, the sales teams and change the revenue. So that really fed into my strengths and the things that I really loved to do. So now that I've gotten to the point where I've kind of ticked those boxes, I see this as an opportunity to give back to a lot of people. And I have clients all over the country and all over the world that I'm able to help them in a similar way that the executive coach helped me while I was at Google. So I feel like I'm giving back to others what was given to me.
Oh, that's amazing. My guess would be that if you didn't go through that introspection, you would have kept going in the same direction, being tired and not doing the things that you love. So I think that's an important point that you made because sometimes we want to keep pursuing one thing, and it's making us. It's not does not make us happy, right?
Yeah.
We are doing it, we can do it, but when you found your strength and your weakness, you decided to, you know, leave aside the weakness from my understanding and use your strength to launch what you're now an executive coach and giving back to people that are going through similar things that you went through.
That's
And I
just
really
it.
like that.
Yeah. So that's just it. So I feel like I've established kind of the experience and the credibility with it. So what I always say to people is I'm here to help others so that they don't have to flatline at 40 in a hospital bed to learn the lessons that I've learned, since then. So, let me be your guide in that way.
That's correct. And every journey needs the guide. That's why I do this kind of podcast, because everybody has a different story. And your
That's right.
story might connect with someone, and the next guest might connect with another person. Right. So what we're trying to do is, prevent you from, you know, and sometimes we don't prevent it, right? We try to, and it happens. But what we're trying to do is keep you aside from all that pain, all that struggle, and lead you to an answer, right? Because we have been there.
That's right.
And talking about an answer, can you walk us through the core shift of your 5-step framework? If someone is listening right now, feels completely misguided and exhausted from the daily grind, what is the very first step they need to take to start rebuilding like that feels good when it does?
So the first thing I always say to everybody, and this is free advice, and it's a question, a quote from a gentleman named Peter Crone, who's a British kind of spiritual advisor, and he asks the question, "Who would you be in the absence of your concerns?" So I always recommend people ask themselves that question. Who would you be in the absence of your concerns? And I love the phrasing of it because he doesn't ask you what your concerns or your fears are. He just asks you to think about who you would be without them. And the magic of that question, and I can see you thinking about it yourself, is that that isn't me giving you any guidance other than just asking you a question. Then you go inside, it opens up a part of your brain and your mind that I think your soul, that then says, "Wow, if I didn't have that, this is how I would feel first and foremost, and then this is what I would do. This is how I would live my days and my weeks and my months and my years." And so I always recommend people ask themselves that question and do it over the course of a couple of days, because you'll do the first one and you'll do a dump, and then you'll think about the next one. You might even add some additional ones once you've given yourself permission to feel that way. And I think that then provides a bit of a North Star for people. They're like, wow, that's actually where I could go. So there's more, but when you ask me what would be the first thing I'd say, is I'd ask people to ask themselves that question.
I think it's a great question, and you made me think a lot. It's like because we sometimes look at our fears so much that when we look at them past them, I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
right? In
And
in,
and
in
you're
any
and you're
journey.
and if you're living in that mindset of the fears, or I like how he calls them concerns, oftentimes you can't extract yourself from it. But it's saying, like, who would you be if you didn't have those? And if you then are thinking about how your brain operates, you're like, okay, if I just let those things go, wow, how much more free I could be, and maybe even different things than you would do that you're not currently doing.
It's a different life if you live past your fears.
Mhm.
So I see that you're now helping other high performers build a more sustainable approach to success. What does success means to you?
So for me, at this stage of my life, it means having an impact and helping others. So, the word impact gets thrown around, but at least for me, it's kind of easy to quantify when I'm working with clients and they end up in much different positions than they were when we originally started. And so the biggest testament that I get is, I get the majority of my clients through referrals, through other people who've worked with me and have had, significant positive impact and changes, that they will then run into people, a friend or a coworker, and they're out to dinner or whatever. It will come up over conversation, and then they'll say, "You know what? You should talk to this guy, Chris Woods." So that's really what success and fulfillment means to me now, is having impact on as many people's lives as possible. And I plan on doing this, now that they've given me a cleaner bill of health, post flatline. I plan on doing this for decades to come.
God willing, you will. Because what we are here on this planet is, I think we're not here on this planet to be successful on our own. I think we're here on this planet to help others, and that way we are successful.
Agreed. That's
So
the true measure of success.
yeah, so looking at that, it also going back to introspection. When you're introspecting of how you want to live your life, that answer of success comes to you. And it might not happen in a quick second, right? It might take a while. My guess, it took you a while to know this is what I'm about to do, and it took me a while personally to
Of
say I'm
course.
going to do these podcasts, I'm going to do these videos, right? I'm going to start up helping others.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say the answers to all your questions can be out there, but they're always within. It's always, you have to start the process. And sometimes, you get divine guidance and intuition, and get the answers sooner rather than later. But really, everything is within. And so that's even what I say, not only about the book, but even about my 5-step framework. Is the first thing is gaining an awareness of your fears. And then the second thing is gaining an awareness of, your talents and your strengths and the gifts that you were given. Because, not to get too religious, but it's like, this is how God made you. And he didn't make you to have fears to hold back, right? Those were things that built up over time. And then the things that you're really good at, these are also the gifts that you were given. And you're meant to actually, lean into those. And again, you'd have to do some other things that aren't as great for you, because people need to make a living, and do what they need to do. But if you're in the luxury of being able to plot out your own course, the smartest way to do it is to get in touch with what's been holding you back fear driven wise, and also lean into your strengths, because that's where you can really win.
Yeah, one of the things that the Bible says is that lay your fears aside, put them on God,
That's right.
not on yourself. So live a life that is not full of fears, and you are able to fulfill what you want to in life. Because if you live in fear, what you're also going through is that you are losing time doing things that you don't like to do, or losing time not being with your family, your friends, right? Because you are so overwhelmed by your fears that it leads you to a completely new life that is not going to be driven by what we mean by success.
Yeah, it should be driven by love. So there's a quote by Saint Francis de Sales from years ago, and he said, "Be who you are and be that well, so that you may bring honor to the master craftsman whose handiwork you are." And I love that because it's the idea of be yourself and be the best version of you. Don't spend your time trying to be someone else or fit into a different mold or work all on your perceived deficiencies. That's what I always say is like play full offense on your strengths as opposed to playing defense on your weaknesses, because that's what you were put here on earth to do.
Yes. And what would be some recommendation that you would have for someone that is out there right now and is looking to introspect what they can do to, look at not at themselves physically, but the inside of them, their thoughts, and get them through?
So the first thing is getting back to the last thing we talked about is ask themselves that question, right? Who would you be in the absence of your concerns? That's the first one. Secondly, as it relates to strengths, I recommend everybody take one of those Clifton Strength Finders or something like it. So it's an online diagnostic that will then read out to you your top five and even your top 10. But I always tell people to focus on your top five talents and strengths and be honest with yourself and say how much of it you're actually leveraging and map it against your current life, your current job, and even outside of work. And see where you can be doing more of that, because that's what you're here to do. And that's what will make your heart sing. So if you can gain awareness and then potentially manage better the fears that hold you back, and then also gain an awareness of your strengths and get all into those, that's when you're actually humming on all cylinders. And then what I say after that is, when people work with me based off of that new awareness, we reset their goals, their career and their personal goals, now from a position of strength. And then where it really comes down, those are the first parts of it, are the really inspiring parts. But where it gets tough is then when you need to address mindset improvements. So, because you're with yourself all the time, to be aware of how you're thinking and how you're perceiving things, because mindset drives it all. And then lastly, habits, the things that you're doing every day that you know you should be or you shouldn't be. That's the hardest thing, because as great as it is when you have good habits and they can run on autopilot for you, oftentimes a lot of people have bad habits, or at least habits that aren't in place to support the new version of themselves. They just kind of keep them in the old version of themselves. So it's a 5-step process the way I work with people. But the first thing, the most empowering thing, is to ask yourself, who would I be in the absence of my concerns?
That's a great answer. What I would add to that is that when you're looking at habits, you don't have to go for a big habit, something that will change your life completely. You can do tiny habits, and I have spoken about this in another video, another podcast. It's the important thing of finding something that you can do every single day that's going to change you. If you can do 1%, you change 1%, or every day, you're going to be 1,000% better
That's right.
in the future, instead of, I'm going to do this big habit
Right.
and then you don't completely do it and then it just fails.
Right. And then you feel lousy about it. And what I always say, I've read this before, is that the universe doesn't respond to your goals, right? It responds to your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so to be able to take a real honest look at that and then decide, what you want to be doing differently and then actually do it. That's how you can have real change, because sure, it's a great thing to establish what you want to be doing differently. But until you start doing those things, the habits, the mindset changes, it's not really going to change. But the good, inspiring news, as you said, is you can start small and it will change, but it takes a commitment.
And it does. And it's a commitment that it has to last. You're not going to win this in 2 days,
For
three
sure.
days. It's going to take a while. If you are trying to go on a diet, you're not going to see yourself lose 50 pounds on the first 5 days, unless
Right.
you do go through a surgery, right?
Well,
But
we're not
that's
even saying that. That's what I say too, is that it's like, so if you want to do that to change the weight that you had, right? You didn't gain that 50 pounds in 2 days, right? So it's like that. My whole thing is that it took you compounded over time to get here. It will take you compounded over time to get where you want to go.
that's correct. So, Chris, can you please speak to us more about your book and everything that you're doing right now?
Sure. So the book is called Balls and Brains, a framework for living your best life by overcoming fears and maximizing strengths. So we've talked about the two components of it, right? Is identifying the fears that are holding you back. And it ends up becoming an invitation during the book. And I do put a process in place on how you can become more aware of these things, and then actually how you can start the reprogramming. And I always say in my interviews and even in the book, it's like these are meant to give you a framework on how to improve, but it's not an overnight, I'm not going to hypnotize you and I'm not going to give you a pill, but it will give you framework and tools on how to gain awareness of the fears that are holding you back and how to reprogram them. And then the brains part of it is not about being smart in school. It's about being smart about where you're putting your effort against, your strengths, as opposed to what I always say is, instead of playing defense on your weaknesses, you're playing offense on your strengths. So that's what the brains part of it is. I talk about that Clifton Strength Finders, but also other ways that you can identify that. And then what do you do with that? And then how do you end up building your next 3 months, your next 3 years about what you want to do with it? So that's what the book is about. It's meant to be an invitation on this. It's the first 2 steps of the 5 steps. The 5 steps, as I said before, it's identifying the fears, it's identifying the strengths. And then based off of that, third step is establishing new goals. And then it's the mindset, and then it's the habits. So those parts are, require, I wouldn't say require, oftentimes benefit from working with a coach who can keep you accountable. Because, oftentimes, if you're just doing it on your own, unless you've got that really hard discipline, it always, helps to have somebody who's kind of keeping you honest on those things.
No, that's great. And I will leave the link for the book down in the description. And Chris, where can people find you online? Social media? Anywhere?
So, very simple name. So it's Chris Woods. So Chris and Woods with an S. And I'm a coach. So my website is simply called chriswoodscoach.com. And that's my, social media handle everywhere. And so on the website, chriswoodscoach.com, you'll see more details about how I work with people. There's more testimonials from people who've had great experiences. There's a link there over to Amazon to grab the book, Balls and Brains, as well as there's a way to message me directly from the website in case anything you heard today resonates with you and you'd like to talk more.
So I will leave all those links down in the description. And Chris, before we go, what is your final word of encouragement or challenge to someone that is looking to see past their fears, past everything that they're going through right now before we end the podcast?
So I'd say this is the advice I give to every person on earth is, if you're not doing it right now, start a real practice of gratitude. And for example, how I do it, and I recommend other people do it. When you wake up in the morning, your alarm goes off. Before you go check your phone, before you even get out of bed, lay there and think about all the things that you're grateful for. For example, you could be just saying, I'm grateful that I woke up this morning. I'm grateful that I hear birds chirping. I'm grateful that I'm looking forward to a good lunch today. I'm grateful that my family is around. anything. But once you start identifying and starting a mindset of gratitude and things to be grateful for, you'll see things to be grateful for. And do the exact same thing in bed when you're going to bed at night. Put your phone down as you're ready to go to sleep, and you can start with everything. Some of the things I say is I'm grateful for how comfortable my pillow is, and I'm grateful for how, comfortable my bed is. Just start with that, because once you establish that as a habit, we talk about habits again, you will find more things to be grateful for, and you'll retrain your mind to be focusing on gratitude, focusing on the good, and you'll see more good, and more good will come to you. You'll spend less time on the problems and you'll see more solutions. So that's my recommendation to everybody.
Yeah, that's where I've spoken about gratitude in previous podcasts, and you can't imagine how many grateful things you can find when you start looking.
Yeah,
And every day I find more because
that's the magic of it.
yeah, sometimes I look at the news. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so glad that I live in the United States. For example, I live in the U.S., so I'm so grateful for that. And there
Mhm.
are tiny things that you take for granted, that you have water running through your house, food in your refrigerator, everything. Those little details. Once you look at that, you're looking, oh wow, I
For
do have
sure.
grateful things to
I
be
mean,
for.
one of the things that sometimes, like if your power ever goes out and you're like, oh gosh, I can't believe everything that I use is requires electricity, my refrigerator, my microwave, anything. And then once it comes back on, you're like, oh gosh, I'm so glad it's so back on. So don't wait for it to go out. Be thankful for the things um, that are all around you. And once you change the way you look at the world, you'll see the world differently.
100%. And that goes through what you experience at the hospital and what I experienced. After that, you look at health differently.
Of
Uh,
course.
the, ab- the ability to walk, the ability to do the things on your own. That's some things that when you go through things like that, you don't see it until you go through them.
Amen.
So, Chris, thank you so much. I think it has been a wonderful talk. And I will leave all your links down in the description for people to connect with you and to go buy your book. It's going to be so interesting to read. And well, thank you for the audience for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with the people that you love so that we can keep spreading this message. And may God bless you all. Take care.